Hey y'all, I'm Kelly Moody and you're listening to the Ground Shots podcast, an audio project exploring our relationship to ecology through conversations and storytelling with farmers, herbalists, craftspeople, naturalists, artists, and more. Hey y'all, you're listening to episode 14 of the Ground Shots podcast. I am in Santa Cruz, California right now. I have been doing a lot of things the past few weeks. Signed up for a permaculture design course, kind of last minute, got put on a wait list and then got in. And then my truck had some troubles and all the rains up there in Trinity County caused the road to potentially fall away. It was like a lot of things kind of coming together, and got my truck fixed and made it to the permaculture training. It was at the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center in Occidental, California. It's a pretty amazing place, and I did that for 2 weeks. I'm pretty blown away by the training, and it's just been a few days since I left there, and I'm still processing my whole experience. I'm not sure how much I want to say quite yet about it on the record here. I can say my expectations were exceeded, and I have left with a lot of renewed inspiration for my work and projects and some new ideas about how to bring different aspects of what I do and can do in the world together. In the current reality we face with climate change and growing populations on the planet and growing ecological collapse and growing social collapse, it's the reality. And I think the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, the folks Brock and Kendall, who are amazing teachers, who were the main facilitators of this permaculture design course, they just did a really good job of bringing together a lot of different things from the bigger picture to small picture perspectives and giving us kind of a full, well-rounded wealth of information and ideas to kind of take with us. So I'll be talking about that a little bit more in future episodes of the podcast. I'll be interviewing a few people I met. I'm feeling very grateful for my human and non-human connections right now in the world. So this interview is with Aimee Joyaux, who I had recorded our conversation back in October of 2018. So let's see, it's April now. So it's this past fall. I did a residency at her place in Petersburg, Virginia at Cornmeal Press. And I have spent some time at her press in the past, a few years ago, right after I met her in North Carolina. And she invited me to come back for a longer stay. Also, her and Alain, her partner, went to France, so I was there for the whole time they were gone, and they pretty much gave me full reign over their studios and printing press to kind of make whatever I wanted. It was pretty amazing. Like, I talk about it a little bit on past episodes of the podcast because I was putting out episodes while I was there, and of course, when I look back, I'm like, there's so much more I want to make there. Yeah, I met Aimee at Penland School of Crafts a few years ago, and I was really taken aback by the emotive quality of her artwork, and it kind of appealed to me too because she makes stuff in response to race and class and history in the South. That's, I'm from the rural South, and so for me, I'm always trying to figure out how to talk about, respond to, move through race and class politics in the South and how it also relates to environmental and ecological degradation. So let's see, in this interview we talk about having an art practice informed by found objects and materials. A lot of what Aimee uses is things she's found that were going to get thrown away, junkyards, auctions. Using an art practice to process history and culture and humanity and current events. And yeah, in this interview, we were talking a lot about current events that were happening in October 2018. So you'll remember some of those things, but they won't be relevant to right now, April 2019. We talk about creating a letterpress and print studio from materials that would have been thrown away. Navigating Race Politics in Virginia. A critique of capitalism, how our culture undervalues art, the importance of art for reflection on who we are as humans, and Aimee's thoughts on influence versus copying in art. A pretty big conversation that's going on right now. Also in this episode is some music. Additional music comes in somewhere mid-interview. It is Christopher Buckingham's song called Ghost Waltz. If you have any music you feel like would fit into this podcast, please do email me. I am really open and interested in featuring a lot of different kinds of music, taking kind of submissions or recommendations for music I have permission to use, and if I feel like it fits and I'm into it, I will put it in. And with that, let's go ahead and get to this conversation with Aimee. Enjoy it, and if you have any comments or thoughts afterwards, please do email me or post it on the blog. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, happy listening.
Burn, burn with the light that reveals our faces. Burn, burn with the heat that will warm these places.
We're here in Petersburg, Virginia.
Yay.
Pretty close to my hometown. And I'm sitting in Aimee's house and studio. Maybe you could give us a little bit of a backstory of where we are in the world, the place. Not a lot of people know this place. And
Petersburg.
and or the region, and then how you ended up here.
Petersburg is a primarily African-American community, and at one point it was the capital of Virginia, and it was a very important Black community with a lot of leadership, a lot of mercantile class, and one of the kind of fallouts from the Civil War, and it comes down to just a strange kind of commercial glitch. There wasn't a railroad that connected Petersburg to Richmond, and Petersburg had a huge harbor. So a lot of merchandise was moved out of Petersburg and was moved into the area, and so Petersburg was a real hub of a large kind of capitalist wheel. But they would have to take everything off the train at Petersburg and move it to a different train on a different track to get it to Richmond. But somebody in Richmond solved that problem and ended up rerouting things on the train, and then Richmond became the capital. I'm leaving a ton of details out, but it was something that kind of simple that we didn't think mattered enough, and ended up losing a tremendous amount of economic prosperity. And in a capitalist culture, it's all about economic prosperity, and everything kind of falls from there. So this was a really prosperous town before the Civil War, and it was really growing. It had, again, a large Black community, lots of Black leadership, educated African-American community. And then after the Civil War, like so much of the South, the economy really was gutted. And the building that we're in now is one of three connected buildings built by these two brothers. And they were all built as spec warehouse space, meaning we're going to kind of build these empty spaces, and with this booming economy, somebody's going to come in and fill it, and it's all going to be awesome. So they're really designed as big brick shells. They've got 3 stories and basements, all of them. And they were all just brick, whitewashed, again, empty space. And then the war came, the economy collapsed, and this never realized itself, and it became a lot of other things, like it was a hat store, and it was a mercantile, a dry goods store. So it was built in 1855. In 1885, Titmus Optical bought the building, just this one of the 3. We're sandwiched between the other 2, and we're on a cross street. So this building is interesting to us because being sandwiched creates insulation. It lowers our heating and cooling costs quite a bit. And being on a cross street gives us light on both sides of the building. So we're uniquely positioned to take advantage of those factors.
And light.
Yep, insulation and light. So when Titmus Optical bought the building, they wanted to plaster the walls, which were whitewashed, so they had to, somebody who probably was brown, had to scrape all the walls by hand to create tooth to put the plaster in. And that's one of the very interesting visual features of this house, is that it's like a calligraphy on these walls. But once you look at that, you'll actually see that all over the South and the East, anywhere where there's brick architecture. Once you know what you're looking at, you'll notice that it's everywhere. But Titmus Optical also wanted to put a big light well in their store on the first floor. So they cut a hole in the roof, increasingly larger hole through the middle of the building. And when we bought the building, there was no electricity, obviously, in it. We had flashlights and my camera flash. And the floors were pretty level, but they were covered with pigeon shit. And what we found out was that all the floors were actually collapsing. Oh. So this was a tremendously expensive, time-consuming part of the renovation. So I'll come back to that when I tell you the story of why we live here and how we got the building. Mm-hmm. I worked at a university in Muncie, Indiana, which is where I met my future husband, Alain. He ran the art museum and I was on the art faculty. And we got together and fell in love. I didn't love Indiana. I wanted to get out of there. I wanted to practice art more full time, and he was ready to get out of there. He'd been in the Midwest for 30 years. He could take early retirement, keep his health insurance, and that created some flexibility for us. And we looked all over the country. The goal was a big building. And then the goal became a little clearer. It needed to be in a depressed town because that not only made it affordable, but it also meant that the code compliance people would not be breathing down our neck, because he's not a licensed contractor, but he's pretty handy. And then we looked in New Jersey and a big farm in New Jersey and a factory in Rhode Island and a Ford plant in Iowa. And then it started to become clear to us that it couldn't be in too cold a climate, because we'd have to spend so much money heating it that we're deviating from our plan, which was this needed to be cheap. So then we thought, okay, we need to kind of be in the South. And then we wanted to be close to an international airport and on the East Coast, because his family's in France. He didn't want to live too far south because he's afraid of the Confederates. Little did we know.
Wait, and then you moved to Richmond.
Little did we know.
Or near Richmond.
So I came to a conference. We found Petersburg on the internet. It had a lot of buildings. I came to a conference in Richmond for photography. I taught photography at the time. And we fell in love with Petersburg. And so the building that we're in now was not for sale. We did look at it. It wasn't for sale. But there were all these empty buildings, and none of them were for sale.
Why is that?
Because two reasons. One of them was one woman owned the majority of them, and she wasn't selling anything. And another was the city was very suspicious of outsiders. So they called us in Indiana and said, the building you were looking at, it has come up for sale. Are you still interested? And I said, yes. And they said, well, what are you going to do in the building? And I said, I'm an artist, and they're like, check minus. Do you know anybody in the area? And I said, no, but I'm not worried about that. So you have no family in the area? No. You have no friends? No, but we're not concerned about that. Little do I know, check minus. Do you have a job in the area? No, but I'll find a job, I've had lots of jobs. Okay, there are no jobs in the area, check. Is your husband a licensed contractor? No, but he's really handy. Forget it. What are you going to do in the building? I'm going to be an artist. It's going to be so cool. You know what? That building's not available anymore. Thanks for your time. No. Call Alain. He will explain this differently. Because he had worked with structural engineers and architects at the university. He had access to all the facilities people. We did a heat and cooling index. He'd done a tremendous amount of work on this building, just trying to figure out, how do I do this inexpensively? How do I insulate it?
At the museum that he
Yeah, he had access, he was an administrator there for 20 years. He had access to everybody. And he was always doing weird creative things, and he was like this weird Alan guy, and they're always like, oh, what do you got up your sleeve now, Alan? So he had thought so carefully about it, and it is true. I did get all those things were true, but that, the Southern culture, we're not from around here, we don't have any family here. This is a very depressed town economically. I think I'm just going to waltz in here and find a job. And I'm going to be an artist. And, artists have a bad reputation. We're going to come squat in the building, do bad, shoddy construction, and then split. Mm-hmm. So I get that. But we were able to purchase, this is a 16,000 square foot cotton warehouse, and we paid $32,000 for it.
Was it actually used for cotton processing or?
No, it was, cotton
it?
bales. There are holes on the corners of the building, all the way from the basement up to the third floor that are the size. It was designed for that. But again, the economy fell out of the... Before they could really use it for that. So it was used for kind of everything else. Like, here's a big empty building, who wants to rent it? And like all these buildings, it was designed to be lived in on the third floor, on the second floor, and then you have your shop downstairs. So it's zoned residential commercial. Again, totally normal. And so it is a bonus for us to have a residential or a commercial space downstairs, but it's full of our junk business. And it would be nice to rent that and have that income. So at some point, if we can, Alan does a big eBay, he's a salvage man. And he generates good income. There's no reason to run away from that right now, but it would be nice to have passive income. Somebody writes you a check every month. Mm-hmm. But we're just not there yet. And he thought it would take 5 years to renovate the building. We lived in a little rental house about 5 blocks away. Every Sunday I'd do like 14 loads of laundry in Colonial Heights because it was so dirty. He did all of it. He did all the demolition, all the construction.
And you said he did the electrical?
He did the electrical, the plumbing, all of it. He didn't connect the main breaker because that can kill you, so he hired that out. And he hired the drywall of the ceilings out because he just couldn't reach, that was just a hard thing. And we built around what we found. So we are both very frugal and creative with materials. We're both good at finding stuff. And so we designed the house. We owned it for a year before we moved out here. And we knew demolition contractors in Indiana. So when they had a big demolition job, they'd call us up and say, you have 5 days to go to this house. You can have anything you want. So we got all of the historically appropriate doors, all the right size with all of the hardware from one house.
Wow.
We got all the windows from another house. We got, so we're always scavenging stuff.
Historically appropriate for
this
building.
1850s building.
That's wild.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we brought 2 semis of building materials out here. We bought the scratch and dent refrigerator. We bought cherry cabinet doors from, just everything. If we can pay a dime on a dollar for it and we think we can use it, that's really what we did. And then we got out here and it's like, okay, well, we have these things. And then we found out all the great salvage places around here. Chesterfield County Public Schools sold their entire shop for the, when kids used to take shop.
Whoa.
So the whole wood bench, $250. Bowling alley. We made 3 big gigantic work tables out of this bowling alley. So we're both very creative and buy this crap and then think, okay, well so we never came to this like, we want a house that looks like X, let's go buy all that. Mm-hmm. We came to it like, well, we have this.
What can we do with it?
Yeah, what can we do with this? So it's been, I think, and Kelly can attest to it or not, that it's turned out to be this amazing space to live and work in. And it's really built around found objects.
Yeah, I love that. Within our culture being so all about just going and buying it, instant gratification.
Yeah.
The creativeness of letting the objects make the space.
Yeah.
Or letting, there's an auction, there's this beautiful thing you never thought you would have access to.
Yep.
But now you can figure out where it fits.
And that's how I approach my creative practice, the same way. And we talked about that a little bit in our text exchange. I like to react to things. I like it. I don't go to the art store saying I want 10 pieces of this paper. I'm like, oh, I got this paper. What can I make in this size? Or how can I react to this color? Or I got all these canvases. These are from an Army surplus sale, and they all have this big seam down the middle. Oh, this is a seam. Should this be horizontal or vertical? It would never occur to me to throw that out. And I'm able to produce a lot of stuff in part because I am a compulsive maker, but I'm not paying a lot of money for these things, so I don't feel a lot of risk. Like if I went out, and I just did a series of large drawings on big, expensive paper, but I didn't buy it because I would have been so intimidated. Like, that's $100 sheet of paper. Shit, I don't know. Oh my God, I can't. So I love the freedom of, okay, this is salvage material. I'm just going to go for it.
I have a hard time doing stuff with my handmade paper for that reason.
Yes, it's precious.
Because, the ability to make handmade paper requires having expensive technology or
Access.
really simple technology that takes up a lot of space and it makes very few sheets at a time. Yeah, so access is a big issue, as well as printmaking equipment too, for that kind of stuff. But there's a lot more community print studios that you can get access to things. But paper is pretty rare to be able to have access to.
And I love paper, and I get paper and I don't care if it's written all over normally, like we go to flea markets in France and I get all these ledger papers with beautiful handwriting, or I went to Japan and I get all this, it's all handmade paper, it's all beautiful, these newspapers that I got. One thing I'm really trying to do is stop hoarding my best materials and start using them. I have a really good friend who was just diagnosed with brain cancer. Yet another reminder, the time is now. I don't want to save my best stuff for later when I get good. I want to go ahead and use it. And so I'm really trying to, I've had a couple of flushing out of the studio space, and I'm really trying to just share the stuff, and we're always donating to local community art centers, but I really want to reach for the nice stuff or the precious stuff and stop waiting. I don't want to wait to use that because I may never get around to it, and it is so interesting and so beautiful, and why not?
It's funny, I was just talking to a friend of mine who was at Penland when I was there. Earlier about someone where he lived dying, the neighbor dying, this older man, and then the people his kids were like, come and get stuff if you want out of the house. And they had this whole bar with the top shelf liquor that he was saving for the best day, and then
He
died, and then these college kids got all this top shelf liquor in the bar.
Nice.
And put it in their house.
Well, good for them.
I just thought of that. Why save your...
I know. Well, because it's beautiful, and you just think I'll have a better idea, or I'll be better at my craft, my sewing's not quite there yet, or I'm just trying to do it. I've always been pretty carefree. I wasn't raised an artist, and I didn't discover art until later. I have an MFA in photography, but I didn't have a photo background, and I tricked my way into that program a little bit. So I really was a complete rookie when it came. I did not know the rules of photography. And luckily in the program where I studied at the University of Oregon, every graduate student had to take photo 1 and photo 2, and this really pissed off a lot of people because they're like,
if they're not photo,
I'm a graduate student in photography. But the goal was that you're awesome and you're going to bring a whole new level to these beginners. But for me, it was, I don't know anything. And I broke all the rules. I was completely experimental. I was very free. I'm very, what's the word? I'm not that good at following rules. I'm improv is my thing. And the photo teachers were looking at me, and they didn't know whether that was totally fantastic or how come I didn't know these things, And it was great. I had a fantastic experience in graduate school.
It's interesting the fine line between the rules and then the push to be more experimental in the art world and or photo is a whole other world too. But yeah, like suddenly the fact that everything is like a certain dimension for certain reasons, or like you don't realize sometimes that there are rules that.
And some of them are for safety. There are some chemicals you're not supposed to mix together.
Right.
But people get really trapped by rules, and they can't step outside the lines. And those are great guides, but you're not going to do anything truly creative or unique unless you take the dive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like how you collect a lot of materials that you wouldn't necessarily find in an artist's studio. Yeah, like the canvas stuff from the Army surplus, or some artists for sure, but the idea of also curate your art is informed by the materials that you find as well.
Yeah.
And in your print shop, and like papers and pieces and parts of things that.
Yeah, to stumble on these newspapers from the 1850s through the 60s, which are all about the Civil War, and they're typeset on hand-laid paper, prior to pulp, and right now in the Trump era and fake news, it's like there's a big fat gift in your lap.
Yeah, to read that and be able to be like, what's changed and what hasn't changed?
Well, it is funny because there was a headline about the Civil War in Syria in 1850. That hasn't changed, sadly.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. But the writing is articulate and witty and concise, and they've got poems in there, and they've got excerpts from the Bible, and they've got philosophical Greek writing. I mean, it's unbelievable. This is where people, mostly an educated group of people, got their information about the world. And the average newspaper today is written for a 7th grade level, and then much of it is just scandalous, and there is fake news, but there's also great journalism. But to have a president accuse all the major outlets of printing complete bullshit designed intentionally to undermine his superiority it's shocking. So it's really fun for me to take those actual newspapers and make fun of he who shall not be named, 45.
So that's something you're currently working on. I know when I was here a couple years ago doing like a little mini artist residency, you were working on a piece or a collection of pieces on newspaper found during that era, or maybe after, that was documenting the way that property got allotted.
Yeah,
in
the
this
city
area
lots.
of Richmond.
Those were ledgers, yeah, and I stumbled on those. And actually, these newspapers are by the same owner, oddly.
Wow.
This was a book, a series of ledgers about property owners in Petersburg, Virginia, and they were organized by whites and colored. And, I'm not from the South, so that just right out of the gate is shocking to me. And then, of course, the white people owned more property, and it was more valuable. And I was working on, I just finished a project called the Box Project, based on Henry Box Brown, who was a slave who shipped himself up north to be free. And the idea of the box is loaded. And then I came across these ledgers, and I continued with the same kind of drawing, and just grappling with my own biases and what it means to be white, and what is a majority minority, and to be hated because I'm white, and then just the culture clash, and just trying to unpack all that stuff. Drawing and writing really helped me. And my art is always just in response to, I feel like I'm the sieve, and there were years when everything was black and brown and red, and I was sad and angry and frustrated and confused, and my work is always this interface, and that sounds so solipsistic, it's all about me, but that's what I'm doing. Art is a way for me to understand the world that I live in, and I know that I'm not alone trying to figure out what the heck is going on. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be living at this time? But not only am I influenced by my materials, I look very broadly and closely at art and art history. I'm married to an art historian. So I love literature and poetry, and so I'm trying to get all of these responses about humanity and nod to them when I think they matter.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool that Alain also is like a really, almost seems like a perfect partner to have, because you're like, okay, I need this thing made to do something not in the rules, right?
Yep.
And he's like, I'll make it for you.
I know. It's amazing.
Like with the letterpress studio and getting all those feedback stamps, which we can talk about too, but and that they don't really fit necessarily in the traditional printing, whatever that means too,
Yeah.
And like, okay, we'll just alter things. And
it is. No argument from me. It's in some ways it's a perfect marriage, and there's no such thing as perfect, and so we have our stupid arguments. But sometimes I wonder, could I just hire you on Saturdays and you would do anything I wanted? Because he really does. And the letterpress studio is a great example. I need a certain kind of furniture, or I want to make an arc. I mean, he will custom solve my problems for me.
Because you can't really get that stuff anymore, really. I guess 3D printing nowadays makes it easier to get type, and it's all plastic.
Yeah.
But things that would have been made out of lead or wood. I mean, I guess wood furniture, it's not that hard to
No,
create,
but it's so much faster.
Yeah.
I love letterpress. It's about like my Sudoku. It's a puzzle and you have to figure it out, and that's all very exciting. But just to give him a great big shout out, he expands my potential exponentially. And I was single for a long time. I lived alone for 15 years. I got married at 40, my first marriage. And I dated some artists, and it's hard when you're a creative to not be involved with people, or if you're involved with people who aren't creative, it's always difficult because you're just not on the same wavelength. But I did discover that other artists that I dated, male artists that I dated, it was always competitive and they always had to win. It always had to be about their work, and it was about, and I just thought, that's not going to work for me. I'm not going to get into a position where I exist to support you in your work. I have my own work, but I do want to be with somebody who understands art. And so Alain did study studio art. He studied painting and ceramics and jewelry, metalsmithing, but ultimately his interest was in art history and craft. And so we're not competing. We're a great complement to each other, and he's much more structured than I am, and so my crazy, wacky, we do argue a lot because he's like, no, you can't do it that way. Why not? Because this is how you do it. Well, what if you did it like this? So
he sort of creates a container in some ways, or he seems like he's open to, obviously, the fact that you like to break all the rules, but then it's like, okay, practically, don't think we can do that.
Yeah. We got into some huge fight once because we just think differently. I don't know if it's the Venus-Mars thing, but I like to generate ideas, or I wanted to make this boat, and I'm literally drawing in the air with him. I want to make this boat. I want to make it out of lead. I want it to fall from the wall, and that's just a starting place. I'm not ending. I'm not truly describing what I want. I'm just trying to start a conversation, and I'm very interested in where it could go from there. And I don't have a definitive landing spot, but he's very much like, okay, you want to build a boat. You said you wanted to build a boat and you want it to fall, but you can't do that for the following reasons. And we get into this tangled conversation, and it just ends up with him saying, we don't have the right screwdriver for that. And I just went absolutely crazy because I thought, I'm up here in the air waving my arms and you have decided that we don't have the right screwdriver.
Before you even really get past that, it could end up being a paper boat.
It could be, but that is not, so we still have those arguments, but we're better about, okay, let's not go down that road because we don't speak the same language. And if I want something specific, he will help me, and he's unbelievable. But if I want something, if I'm kind of wandering around in space, that is not a place where he is going to be helpful for me.
So this house, It took you 5 years? It actually
It took him 5 years
5
before
years.
we could move in. So
And
I had the
there's-
JOB,
Yeah.
and I still have the JOB, but I'm ramping up. So we've been here, we've been in Petersburg since 2002.
Wow.
So
And it's still not quite finished.
not
right?
quite. We're getting close though. We only have a couple. We have a couple of things like the doors in the print shop, but then now you got to go back. The windows in the front need to be replaced, and we want to put thermal windows in there. The roof, we need a new roof. It never ends with an old house or an old building.
Mm-hmm. Do you have long-term plans for what you want to do with, I don't know, the space that you're creating here?
Well, I really look forward to retirement so that I can work as an artist full time. So I want the time. I want to dig into my very best materials. I want to slowly get rid of stuff so that, you know, I've got a lot of clutter in here. It's organized, but, you know, I've always lived in tiny places, and now I live in this big house, so I filled it up. When I moved to Petersburg, I would walk the dog in all the alleys, and I would pick up all this shit. I was always dragging crap home. So that's not important to me now. And so what I want to do is slowly have a lot less stuff because I use it or give it away, and the space empties out. We're not gonna, you know, I'm 58 and he's 68, so we're not gonna be as young and strong. So if we think about a decade, you know, he's gonna wear out probably before I do. But the goal is to just kind of start using stuff up and getting rid of some stuff. And but I really want 10 years in here. I'll never have this space anywhere else. I mean, we talk about phases. This is a phase, and I want to eat it and drink it. It's funny because we just got our tax bill for this space, and it's way more than we could sell it for. And we tell them that we have 2 bedrooms and 3.5 baths in this house, and they're like, "This is a 16,000 square foot house." You do not. You have apartments in there. You don't. Nobody has a space like this with 2 bedrooms. That's absurd. No, that's what we have. We have 2 bedrooms, and so I don't think anybody's going to buy this building and do what we're doing with it. I think
would turn it into apartments.
They're going to flip it into apartments.
Like one on each floor, probably.
Yep, probably. At some point, we'll probably put an elevator in. The hardest part about living here is dragging crap up and down the stairs.
Because you live on the second and third floors
Yeah.
and work on the first floor.
Yeah.
Wait, well, first and third, right?
Yep.
Yeah, when you get older, stairs become more of a...
Yeah, and even the groceries are hard, but and you know, I just got another printing press. That's 2 new printing
Yeah, we
presses.
moved it out.
Yeah. Oh, you did. Thank
Out
you
of
very
the
much. Good
super
job.
out there.
Yay. And that's crazy, you know. I've got this big, beautiful 8x10 camera, so I've got some great stuff, and I want to use it and take advantage of it. And then I want to get it in the hands of other people that are going to use it.
Yeah, I'm going to be here 2 weeks making stuff, so
Well, you can come back.
I'm almost like, it's too good to be true. To be...
Well, thank you. We appreciate you being here. It is a playground, and it's really fun to share it with someone like you, because you get it, and you're going to have fun, and you're going to dig in, and you're going to make cool stuff. And you know, I'll just never use. I'll never use a tenth of this stuff. We're great at finding things, and we usually find it at auction. So that roll of upholstery thread in that cool little cute container, you know, I've got 45 of those, and I've been giving 3 away a year. So I just have so much stuff, and it's really rewarding to share it.
I find it, well, so since Trump became president, you were making political art, or art that to me feels political, talking about the things that people in the South feel uncomfortable talking about, to me, being from the South. But I feel like since Trump became president, that's kind of exploded,
Yeah.
the commenting on that. So when we met, it was before Trump became president, and I was like, wow, I'm glad someone's making art in this way about these things, and the way that you're doing it, you know, when we met at Penland School of Crafts. And so it's been interesting now to see, like, the other people or the world is kind of catching up to commenting on that. Like it's
Yeah.
kind of exploded itself open, and
I'm so glad.
yeah.
But both sides have opened, so
Yeah.
me too. But just, we have a Senate election coming up with a candidate who's openly a white supremacist. I mean, what?
Yeah.
How does
It's
that
almost
happen?
Like, how does this real?
A Supreme Court nominee who, even if he was an asshole in high school, but he's a good guy now. No, there are good guys who weren't assholes. You look at that room, it's all white men. It's still, I work at a small college and we do have some people of color in leadership positions, but everybody that cleans the floors, empties the garbage, and washes the toilets is black. And I'm shocked at that. I think, how can you put that in front of the student population, half of whom are kids of color, people of color? How can you think that that's an okay thing for them to be looking at? Yay, we created opportunity because 4 out of 85 people in leadership positions.
Really, just 4 out of 85.
Yeah, it's just
That's like the tokenizing. We're doing fine now. Like, it's about stepping aside and stepping down and letting other people fill those spaces who are just as qualified.
And the South is just, it feels like the antebellum South here, looking at that, and it's just I look at the new museum down in Mississippi that Ryan Stevens created with the lynching. Is that in Mississippi, Alabama, one of the deep southern states? And I think of states like that making more progress than Virginia. And it just embarrasses me that in the very deep South, they're making more efforts to reconcile.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. We have some very wealthy, stubborn people here. There's enormous pride. I don't know. I don't understand. I get that the past matters. That's one version of the past, and it's post event, the whole Monument Avenue Confederacy statues. The future matters too. I've got kids that I taught in locally, and these white kids, and they're like, we're post-racism. I've got black friends. There's no racism. It's all good. And I say, have you asked your black friends? Do they feel like there's no racism? So you have a neighbor that's black, so we're all good. But you're right. This is a conversation that people do not want to have.
I mean, and I've been out west, and there's a lot of these conversations happening, but a lot of people who would be considered more liberal or in liberal cities think that they're also not racist or post-racist. And the tech companies, it's all white men.
Yes. Yeah.
Portland is mostly white.
I heard a terrible interview with Tom Hanks the other day, and I wanted to like Tom Hanks. I thought I liked Tom Hanks. And he was talking about the Me Too movement, and he said that, the rules have changed. It's a co-ed locker room. And I thought the rules have not changed. The rules were always that we respected each other. The rules didn't change. It was never okay to act like that. We're not in a new place. You guys just didn't have to.
What was he talking about?
He was talking about sexism in the workplace and Weinstein and just why there aren't more women in director positions, but mostly he was talking about sexual harassment in the workplace. Mm-hmm. So the rules have changed. It's like, no. You just got away with it before, and now you're not getting away with it. It's the same rules.
Whereas it's still very much a problem, but it's now there's a lot of it surfacing and being dealt with, or something is happening.
But the whole kind of conversation about, why women don't report sexual assault, but that is hard. That's complicated. And we look at what's happening right now with Kavanaugh, and all these people just don't believe the report. So that's still happening. We don't trust women. We don't believe women. Women aren't rational. Women are emotional. And men are savages, I guess, that can't keep their dick in their pants.
Mm-hmm. That's fine. rated R, whatever. Yeah, man, there's just so much of that happening right now in a lot of spheres. I mean, in the herbal medicine world right now.
Really?
There's just a lot of, there's people who've been taking apprentices and having schools for a really long time, or people who've been given positions of power, and there's just things being unearthed that are showing that some of those people abuse positions of power, or kind of antiquated is a weird word, because that sort of makes it seem like it was okay at one point. It's not now, and never was.
Well, maybe there were different roles that people played. We're a Christian nation. I'm not a Christian, but I believe in the golden rule.
Yeah.
That's not okay. So if you're strong and you get the press out of the car, and I'm not as strong, so I chop the veggies and cook dinner, I don't have any problem with that kind of thing, but that never means you get to use your power against me. Mm-hmm. That never meant that. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, how we value what people are good at.
Hunters and gatherers, right? I have a friend, an English friend, and she's really opposed to women in the military, and she's from a military family. And she's just old-fashioned, but I'm always poking at her, because there are women. I was in the Forest Service as a firefighter, and I was on the ski patrol, and I was a woman in a lot of fields, but ultimately I wasn't that strong, and I'm not that tough. But I'm very compassionate, and that was good on the ski patrol. So there's a role within that. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I don't want to join the Army. But there are women who would be awesome in the Army and awesome firefighters. And there are men who don't want to join the Army. So just what's our word that we use for the genders? You're one or the other?
Yeah.
Yeah. We need the gray in there, and we need to be able to explore all the different ways people can be, and give them opportunity and support to be that. And then if it doesn't work, let's create opportunity and support somewhere else. We're still shoving everybody in their little hole.
Yeah, or assuming someone identifies with this gender or that gender, and then assigning them that reality.
You get the pink list or the blue list. Mm-hmm. And life is long, and you're going to change a lot in your life. And I look at how unhappy we are in America, and I think there are a lot of reasons for that, but certainly among those is the rigidity. We're such a puritanical culture. We're so screwed up about sex and gender and expression, and then you're that kind of also folds down into what we don't have a strength-based approach to our professional development. So you end up in a job you hate, in a body you don't understand, in a relationship that isn't working, and you're just like shoved into it for the years and a decade. And no wonder everybody's drinking a lot and taking drugs. And
I have complete compassion for people who are addicted to things. So
yeah,
right.
I get it.
You can't. I mean, it's a lot to handle in the world we live in.
Yeah.
I'm always questioning that. Ever since I grew up in my small town,
mm-hmm.
45 minutes from here, and felt really like, this doesn't make sense to me. This doesn't make sense to me. These people aren't happy. I just felt like I could see through that.
Yeah.
And sometimes seeing through it almost is. But you're still there is almost worse.
It's
sometimes.
painful. It's very painful. People are trapped.
I because of feeling like I could see that. Well, why do people live in these isolated family units and giant houses they don't need? They doesn't and have this just the things that we're convinced that we need in the American dream. I just always question. So
I think capitalism is absolutely predicated on consumption.
Yeah.
So you have to have more. You have to grow. If you're not, we're like glaciers. If we're not advancing, we're receding. And this is obviously a failed experiment. I'm not quite sure when it's going to ultimately fail, but if you look at the way corporate culture is just siphoning all the fat off of the milk, and we're all left with skim milk and all the cream's gone, it's really happening in front of us very quickly right now.
Yeah, exponentially. I mean, capitalism. I've been reading about the history of capitalism lately, and it's never meant to be. It's sort of thrown to you as something that is perpetual into the future infinitely, but there's no way it possibly can be by the way it's structured.
I think incentive is great. I would love to see us become more of a democratic socialist model. I think that it's embarrassing that our whole healthcare thing and the expensive medication. There was an article on NPR the other day that, you know, Trump promises he's going to bring down costs for medication. In fact, you know, one out of 95 or something, one medication out of 95 has gotten cheaper. The others are going up, even though all of the research that went into making them has been paid back. It's all profit. And these are not like fancy new cancer medications. These are medications people need every day. So it's our own people. Again, we talk about, we're a Christian culture. The most popular license plate in Virginia is "Don't Tread on Me." And this makes me want to scream, because I feel like, who's going to pay for the bridges and the schools and the libraries? And you look at the public schools, they've just been gutted. But where are we as a country if we're not educating people? If only the rich kids get to go to a good school. I'm so against local funding of schools, because that's how Petersburg goes broke and has a terrible school system, and Short Pump looks like a private school, but it's a public school.
My hometown, the area where I'm from, we have a pretty bad school.
If you're poor, you have a bad school.
And it's not that it's that everyone's poor there. There are a lot of poor people there, but it's the, I don't know all the ins and outs, but I do know part of it is about like the allocation of money from the state to an area that's not very populated and it's a bunch of farms. And then the taxes are low because there's a lot of white folks with a lot of land who, in order to make enough money, they have to grow a certain amount of soybeans, and if they pay high taxes on their land, then they have to subdivide it. And it's just
But their soybeans are subsidized.
And their soybeans are subsidized.
It's all crooked, and it's all tilted towards corporate wealth and stockholders.
Interesting to me about your city lots project, it's like, this is primary document right here. Institutional racism, you can see it they decided to give, the black folks less valuable land, or to put them all over here, give them less land, or whatever.
Yep.
It's proof.
Intentional.
I was having a conversation with someone in the past few months from around here that I know online, and it was pretty astonishing to me that they really didn't believe that racism, like I thought that they had a different perspective, but just that they don't think white privilege is real, and that race, and that we're kind of beyond that. And their argument was like, well, a lot of white folks have things that happen to them, or in this person's case, they grew up really poor, or like abused or neglected, and they're like, I don't have privilege. I'm like, well,
that is such a tough argument.
I
have another friend who just told me that. Go tell that to the poor people living in the hollers in North Carolina, and you try to tell these people that they have privilege, but just your skin walking, compared to a poor black person, you have privilege. I'm not saying your life is dandy, and I'm not saying that you've had every opportunity you deserve, but
it was the word privilege that really was hard and triggering for that person.
Yeah, they don't feel privileged. They feel like they're suffering.
Yeah, but it's like realizing how easily is a cis white male that you can just work your way up out of that than it would be if you were someone else.
So many studies have gone to prove that, based on your name, based on
and getting housing, getting loans, getting the ability to buy a house in an area where it's just so much. Yeah,
it's everywhere.
And I think, again, the South, it's a huge thing, and in some ways I feel like in the South it's a lot more, I don't know, what do you think about this? Do you feel like it's very overt and open, and like people just talk about it openly, or do you feel like it's sort of quieted? Because sometimes I think in my head, like, oh no, it's more overt in the South. Everyone, oh, Confederate flags, it's like so out there, but then other times I'm like, actually, maybe there is so much more subtlety than I realize.
I think there is a lot of subtlety. I mean, you still have people whispering about black people, but you have, first of all, it's in your face, right?
Yeah.
You are living in mixed communities wherever you are, and there are my sister in her gated community in California very rarely sees people of color. Therefore, they don't exist, right? In her world, they don't really exist. She's never confronted. I am confronted with poverty every day. And it hurts me to see that, and it just makes me wonder, what can I do to affect this in some kind of positive way. I'm not going to be able to fix it, but just awareness is a start. So you see it, you're confronted with it. It is such an entrenched part of the history of the South and the economic success of the South and the demise of the economy in the South. And then you have this very rambunctious rebel with his Confederate flag. So that, again, you can't ignore that. It's on bumper stickers. We have gigantic, huge Confederate flags, and we have a shrine to Stonewall Jackson in Virginia. But then there's all this subtle, whether it's there are no black people in leadership, so that's happening in HR departments, it's happening in boardrooms, it's happening in hiring, it's happening in school acceptance rates, it's happening in gerrymandering of districts, it's happening in voting, it's happening when you don't make a conscious effort to create a committee that's representing the actual population that you serve. So it's happening in subtle ways and in overt ways, and they're both dangerous. Subtle is usually more dangerous because people feel like they can get away with it, but I don't know, when somebody's screaming at me with their Confederate flag, I feel like that's pretty dangerous.
Yeah, it's hard for me to, I grew up surrounded by that in a lot of ways. Of course, I can't put everyone in a generalized box of like, they're all like this, of course. Yeah. I'm always challenged by that myself, talking about where I'm from and like putting down those people, because those people are my people. I'm just as much a part of that as anybody.
Nobody's all good or all bad.
Yeah, and I can't claim myself as being somehow I'm better than all those people too. Like I have all my own internalized
and we
racism.
get to our beliefs, in a long convoluted path.
Yeah.
The challenge, I think, is to question your belief. Your whole life, I want to keep learning. I want to go to my grave with less stuff, less complicated feelings, a clear, how do you transcend? How do you climb up that pole? you've got to examine some of that stuff and figure out what am I hanging on to that I don't need to be hanging on to, or I don't want to be hanging on to. What do I want to embrace that is going to make the world a better place? How can I do less damage?
Do you have ways that you incorporate your art into this local community in Petersburg and like?
I struggle with that because I know that art builds community and art saves lives, and I'm not a community activist in that way, and I see VCU as cranking out these social justice warriors, and they're in their community and they're getting art in the hands of community members, and I just feel like garbage, like I'm not doing that. I'm the selfish artist alone in my studio. And I certainly run some workshops. I make my protest posters. I give them away. I exhibit my art locally. I want to do more when I have more time. But I also do meet with people, and I have these conversations, and I work with a lot of young people. I've been in education my whole life. So I am trying to cut myself some slack and say, maybe, I've got friends actively right now that are mad at me that I don't run for city council, and that I don't take on the executive director of the Community Arts Center. And I feel very selfish, like I finally have this time to focus on my own work. And is being an artist ultimately a selfish way of living?
Question. Yeah.
And I don't want to think it is, because at different times in my life I've been down on myself, like, why I am not curing cancer here, what am I doing? Is it worth doing? I never cared that much, am I good enough, because I wasn't competing necessarily, but why do it? I seem to be driven to do it.
Why put color on the wood?
Yeah, here I am trying to really argue with yellows and orange that I get the right one. Wow. But I think it's a language, and I'm glad there are poets, and I'm glad there are artists, and I love looking at art, and art fills me with joy, and it challenges my mind. And so I have people that say to me, I'm glad you make art. So I value art. I'm glad other people do it. I happen to do it. And so I can say, okay, it's a thing I think has value. I'm going to keep doing it. Am I going to change Petersburg or fix Petersburg or feed the hungry or stop global warming? I'm really not going to do any of those things. But what I can do is continue to be expressive. Some of my stuff is beautiful. Some of it's harsh. I'm going to go ahead and just try to keep doing that, and I hope some people are inspired. I hope I can have more meaningful conversations. I think art is undervalued in our culture.
Oh, definitely.
So I think art's a really cool thing, so I'm going to go ahead and keep making art.
I have a friend that goes to France a lot, and she's done some residencies, or I forget what it's called, where you do a figure drawing sort of apprenticeship.
Mm-hmm.
And just how shocked she was actually first going over there and realizing how much more art is valued there too as a profession, as like a role in society versus here.
It's like food, we were talking earlier about food, and go to Italy or France or Spain, and they love their food, and France is financially better off than Italy or Spain. So if you look at Italy and Spain, they're not third world countries, but they're probably second world countries. Mm-hmm. So these are not a bunch of rich people putting gourmet sauce and little, but they love their food. They grow their food. They know where their food came from. They think eating and sharing a meal is very, very important. And they value relationships with each other, with their food, with everything's a little bit slower and more important, and they're healthier. Why would art be the first thing to come out of schools? The kids are agitated, so we'll feed them lousy food, we'll take away recess, and we'll take away art, and we'll cram STEM-based subjects down there. No wonder they're agitated. They're hungry, they're tired, they're anxious, they're scared.
Art was my favorite class in high school. It was my respite hour when I was like, okay, I can just go and get into the flow state. And
be human.
Yeah. I've definitely grappled with that. I haven't fully I've always been an artistic person, a creative person ever since I was a child, but I've never fully let myself blossom in that way. In some ways, it's the subtlety of our culture telling me that it's not valuable. And even when I lived in North Carolina on a farm and grew food, I felt like sometimes the people I was around felt like conceptual art or art that was just made to communicate or be beautiful or whatever you're trying to do with it wasn't valuable because it isn't useful. Like there was this obsession with, well, sure, you could make a piece of clothing out of some buckskin or something and it'd be beautiful the way you make it, but like if it isn't useful, if it isn't a basket that you wove that you carry stuff in, or if it isn't, that's an interesting...
A pitcher that you pour water out of is equally as useful as a picture that you hang on the wall.
Yeah.
And design is everywhere. So we haven't done a good job of training people about the value of art and the role of art in our culture because it's everywhere. You picked your shirt that you wore today. Why did you pick that shirt over the other shirt? And people are very interested in arranging their house. Design matters to the brain. But my dentist is just... He doesn't get it, He said, why would you even look at contemporary art? He said, I don't understand it. He said, I like the old masters. And I said, well, I'm a practicing artist. He said, I know you are. And I said, so that's my field, and it's important for me to be aware of what's happening in my field. You're a dentist. If you stopped practicing, or if you looked to the 1600s, these are the artists that you like, and you practice dentist from that lens, practice dentistry, I wouldn't go to you as a dentist. I mean, you need to keep up in your field. Art is a field. It's the oldest form of human endeavor that we have recorded.
Yeah, I mean, there's an art that's
it's a
very
thing.
old.
Yeah, it's very old, and we've been doing it for a long time. And it continues to evolve, and it's hugely important reflection of who we are and how we do things, and we learn so much if we look back at how was the basket made, what materials were growing on the hillside, what kind of clothing were people wearing. It's a great record of history. So it's a lot of things. It's a pretty thing just to relax. What's wrong with relaxing and calming down, or learning about we're really now seeing in school kids who come to college who can't read cursive. This is now happening. So we lose touch with... So I taught a STEM workshop for middle school kids this summer. They couldn't use the scissors. It took 2 hours. These are the talented and gifted kids to figure out how to make a square, a 12 by 12 inch square. They couldn't, these are talented STEM kids. So we're just losing some really, and that we demand critical thinking and creative problem solving. So it's like, well, then we need to just get back to some basics.
That's why I really like craft that's earth-based in that way, for my brain, and learning how to do those skills. Like, how does the willow want to work, the plant, and how it's cured, and what variety is it, what part of the year was it harvested, but then there's also like a math to it, and incorporating all the variables to the math of it and the patterns and like what the bigger picture, and it's like an amazing thing. And I know that, Waldorf school, Montessori, they incorporate that kind of thing, but again, that's not necessarily accessible to everybody.
Yeah, but I have such a wonderful sense of confidence because I can build a fort. I can live. I can't, certainly not in any way. I don't know what you know about nature, but I remember as a Girl Scout going to Girl Scout camp and getting a scholarship to go to this 2-week camp. And one of the things we had to do was we had a limited amount of stuff we could take out into the woods, and we had to have a partner, and we had to build a shelter. And it was very terrible in some ways because nobody wanted to be my partner, and there was all that mean girl drama. But man, I knew how to build a fort. I knew how to build a shelter, and we built this awesome shelter. And then it rained. We were in the middle of a rainforest. Ours was the only one that worked, and this filled me with just this sense of I can survive, not like I'm a survivalist, but I can do this. And Alain can build a house. We can figure it out. So, if the economy crashes and everything goes to hell, we can still make it because we've got these skills that we can figure it out. We can solve problems. We can make some shelter. We can find some food. We can make a fire. I could figure out how to make some clothes. And that is just a really cool thing.
Right. You said jungle. You grew up in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Right. You told me that your life was a lot more like mine in some ways before you landed into this phase. So you grew up in Hawaii, and then you spent a lot of time in wild places, right?
Well, in Oregon. So I went to college in Oregon. I'm one of 7 kids and single mom, so not a lot of money. So I went to college and I worked full time and lived with a bunch of other people. I never had a car until several years after I got out of college. And so if I wasn't living with a bunch of people in a house, I was living in very small studio apartments or a trailer. And I got involved in the ski business because that was the only thing to do in the winter. So in the summer, I either worked as a waitress, I started working at the Forest Service, but I ended up hanging out with I don't have college friends. I don't remember any of those people. I worked all the time, but I worked in these places like the Forest Service and the ski business.
Which are not traditionally women's jobs.
And the heavy outdoor people, right? So river rafting, mountain climbing, biking, just playing outside. And Oregon is such a fun wilderness area. And so that, we just were out there and lots of, again, living off the land and hiking, and we were all poor, so if somebody, we ate a lot of potatoes and we ate a lot of ramen, and if somebody came into some money, we'd buy a block of Tillamook cheese, and it was like, man, this is awesome. So I lived in tiny places, and when I did eventually get a car, I got a station wagon, and I never owned more than that. So that's where I moved to different places in Oregon, and I lived in Washington, and I never had more than that. When I got out of graduate school, I had all these portfolios, and I had a bookshelf, and I had a bike, and I had a car. And I was moving to Indiana, so I had to get a U-Haul, but even the smallest U-Haul that they had, I filled it like a quarter, and then I had all the space, and it's like, what am I supposed to do with all the, I wish I could just put the car inside the U-Haul. And then in Indiana, I lived in a little teeny tiny studio apartment, so now I'm an art professor, so I rented a studio. So, and then I started accumulating stuff because art making stuff, I was painting, and then I met Alain, and he lived in a huge Queen Anne house. But we weren't married, and so I had my little world, and I moved my little world into his world, and I didn't really expand because I have trust issues. So I kind of kept my little world, and he lived in this very ornate house, and it wasn't my space. And then we came out here.
And that's when you were able to really have your space.
And I had my trust, and we moved out here together. So, and then I've just steadily been.
We're like, all right, here we go.
And also being one of 7, you just don't get that much. Yeah. And I'm number 6 of 7, so
I'm used to that.
Low person on the totem pole. You better grab that spaghetti if you want to eat.
Wow, yeah, what a life. You never know where it's going to take you.
You don't. And so, dig in and enjoy it. I could feel bad about this, or I could feel happy about this. I can't do everything. And again, I'm really reminded life is short, and I don't have that many decades ahead where I'm going to, barring any unforeseen event, but I won't stay mobile forever, and my hands are sore and my joints are, I've lived a good, hard, fun life. So I want to do it while I can.
Well, is there anything else you want to share about?
Well, it's so nice to meet you, and I'm really interested in what you're doing and reading about what you're doing, and I can smell the juniper and the sage and the dust. I know with the rabbit brush.
Yeah,
I love that landscape, and the beautiful pictures you post. And I've always been a very solitary being, but I'm married now, and I can't be that. I always want to find my balance, but I don't want to long for something I don't have. I want to enjoy what I have. So it is really cool to see what you're doing and kind of live vicariously through you. It's been really fun to see you become a better writer. You're obviously working on that as part of your craft, and I see your knowledge increasing, and your kind of fluency with plants is becoming natural, and you practice and practice, and then pretty soon you don't have to practice anymore. And I
Yeah,
feel
just
like I'm
comes.
seeing that happening with you.
It's interesting how the online world can reflect things. And I feel like writing has been something I've done a long time, but I have gone through phases where I do it a whole lot. Like in college, I was writing all these philosophical papers, and then for like 5 years, I didn't write anything and just worked on a farm. And you lose; it's a muscle you lose.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Or
don't
if you have a
read
new
and-
subject matter.
Yeah.
And I didn't read your philosophical papers in college, so I think part of it was you were working with a different material and re-entering the way language. But it is, and I'm painting some more interesting paintings, but maybe my next paintings won't be interesting. Who knows? It's a process, and sometimes everything aligns. But it's fun to have you here, and I'm always hungry to learn things, and I'm a magpie. I'm going to steal stuff. So when you made that poster with all that type and all those, it's like I would never take that on. I mean, but then
That was kind of crazy, actually.
but it was cool because the next poster that I made had a lot more stuff in it. And so I have selfish motives for having you here too, because I'm always inspired by other people. And so I want to share this with you. I'm never going to use it. I want it to be used. But I also want to keep getting better, and I want to do different things. I want influence, so I'm very actively looking for that. But I'm careful I don't want everybody's influence, but I do want your influence, so I'm happy to have you here.
It's interesting to think of it that way too, because influence versus copying is a whole other conversation, and especially in the art world, and design world, and nowadays there's so much more of that conversation happening. Maybe I overly think about it a little bit too much, because there's so much in the world of culture and copying. I think that's so important right now, and identity and social politics.
Yeah.
But in the sense of, are you copying a native person's dress style?
Or appropriation. Cultural appropriation.
Or copying a native designer's style, even though it might not be traditional to their...
I think people are really judgmental. I think that we really need to just check it at the door, and the arc of life is long, hopefully.
Yeah.
And if you just pursue your passion, let's let that judgment happen a lot later. And you have to copy. I don't have one single problem with copying. If that's all you do is reproduce somebody else's idea, then that's not very good. And over 20 or 30 years, that's really boring, and you don't get any credit. But if you let that pass through you, and you use that as a way to try something, you have to. If you're trying to find an authentic version of you that borrows from the past, welcome to being an artist. If you get stuck, like I'm an impressionist painter. Well, I'm sorry, that happened in the 1840s, so you need to go ahead and move on. If you want to play with brushwork and color, but every art is challenged, like every field, the cusp of every field is creative. If you want to be on the cusp of creative art making, visual expression, you're going to have to take that wave of everything and find a way to make it yours and make it modern and make it relevant. And that doesn't have to be political. That doesn't, I think political art gets dated very, very quickly.
Yeah.
There's a reason we look at art that's hundreds of years old and are still blown away by it. It's well made, it's well crafted, it's beautiful. It says something. There are things that jump off the wall. How do you make that? And if all you're doing is repeating somebody else's work, you're not going to make that. But if there's something stunningly beautiful, by all means, wrap your arms around that thing and wrestle with it and try to find your piece of that in your way.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, and where as a white person you find something that is so-called exotic, more like beautiful, and like copying that can be really problematic, but then maybe being influenced by the colors, processing that in yourself,
or the materials.
And doing something completely different with it.
I think there are things that are exotic and beautiful, and things that aren't our culture. I get so concerned that I think we have taken political correctness too far. I don't get, the difference between the melting pot, which is like a bowl of refried beans, versus the tossed salad, which is still a mix-up, but everything retains its flavor and its color, and I want to be the mixed salad. So I don't have a curly, nappy head of hair, you know, and the things that are happening in African American culture with hair is just so cool. And I want to be able to say, oh my God, your hair is absolutely incredible. Or I want to look at your hands. I want to look at the color of your skin. I want to be able to touch you and talk to you and ask you questions about your life. And I want to be able to notice that you're different. And that doesn't mean I'm right, like, wow, everyone's like me, but you're different. Mm-hmm. I want to say, you're different than I am. Look at my hands. Look at your hands. Holy cow. That we're different. And why can't we celebrate that and enjoy that? And we can acknowledge it passively or actively. We're definitely noticing it. Mm-hmm. Why can't we talk about it?
Yeah, it's tricky. And I feel very sensitive to it all. You know, maybe there's so many reasons why. But
I did this photo project called the Smile Project, and I'm still doing it. And I did it really because I got a video app, and I'm trying to learn video. So I shoot these 6-second videos of students at Richard Bland College. Petersburg has such a bad rap. Everything's bad, 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 bad. And all I see at school are happy kids, young kids, falling in love, crying, studying. You know, they're kids. They're doing their thing. And so I thought this was around the 46 era, 45, whatever his name is. I wanted to make something positive. So I have people look down, count to 3, look up and smile. I shoot that video, and then I pull that moment just when that smile cracks and their eyes glisten. Mm-hmm. And I post that picture. And the students of color are much more willing to take that picture with me. And they're beautiful. Not all of them. Most young people are beautiful. Mm-hmm. They are. They smile. They've got their whole world ahead of them. And I'm having so much fun with it. And again, most young people are beautiful. So I am photographing a lot of people of color, and I'm photographing a lot of Caucasian kids. But the capturing a beautiful black young man smiling, that's not the way we're seeing. That's not the way we're projecting these people in our culture. Mm-hmm. We're shooting them in the back. We're calling them thugs. We're putting them in jail. So they have big, bright smiles the same way all the other kids have. And it's just wonderful for me to throw that narrative out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really... I've been watching that on Instagram a little bit.
They're just so beautiful. You know, again, it's like you never meet a little kid that can't draw. Mm-hmm. What happens?
How do we... self-analyzation.
Yeah, the criticism. You know, there's just no such thing as a child that's not beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we can leave it at that. And
you're right.
Sun's going down.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely here in your studio. This episode of the Groundshots podcast was produced by Opia Creative. Our music is by Mother Marrow. If you'd like to help us continue to make this audio project a reality, consider becoming a monthly supporter on our Patreon page at patreon.com/ofsedgeandsalt, where we have rewards like entry into patron-only giveaways, additional audio interviews, extra educational content, and much more. You can also share our work and give us a review on iTunes. Visit our website at ofsedgeandsalt.com to see what else we're up to and a log of our episodes when they come out. Check out our show notes for information about how to find us and our guests. Until next time, y'all, thanks for listening.